Our mission as a company is to save lives. I want to know in a few years that we are saving lives. And I guess I didn't get into all the details of how this is happening, but what we're trying to reduce is what they consider hospital acquired infections, or sometimes called healthcare acquired infections. This is when you go into the hospital and you catch something else when you're there. In the US alone, every year, there's 110,000 deaths. 1 in 30 people catch something in the hospital. 110,000 people die every single year because they've caught something they shouldn't have. These are unneeded deaths that shouldn't happen. You know, in comparison, we all talk about gun violence out there. HAIs are double gun violence in the US. There's 50,000 deaths due to gun violence in the US every year, but there's 110,000 deaths due to HAIs. Our goal is to save lives, reduce those HAIs, reduce outbreaks. It's a huge problem. Secondary to all that, we're trying to reduce chemicals. The chemical giants run this show right now. We need to bring this down.
Welcome to NGBiLab, a podcast about startups in Canadian life sciences and the people and stories behind them. Hi, I'm Jim Wilson, and my guest today is Kris Rupay, Chief Technology Officer at HygenX Ai in Ottawa. Kris and his team are developing autonomous AI-driven robotic UV-C disinfection technology that disinfects healthcare spaces in minutes, reduces reliance on harsh chemicals, and helps lower the risk of hospital-acquired infections. What may stand out for you in my conversation with Kris is the company's path. Kris and his co-founder did not begin their entrepreneurial journey in healthcare. Their journey actually started during the pandemic in aviation, and they were trying to solve a different problem. The solution they developed evolved into a technology that makes disinfection of surfaces in healthcare environments faster and more reliable. Before we get to my conversation with Kris, we'd like to remind you this podcast is part of Next Great Big Ideas, Canada's Life Sciences Summit. NGBi is an annual national networking event for Canada's life sciences community, and we invite you to join us. For details on this year's summit, please go to nextgreatbigideas.com. This episode of NGBiLab was recorded in September 2025. Our guest today is Kris Rupay of HygenX Ai. Kris, welcome to NGBiLab.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you, and let's jump in. So what problem is it that HygenX Ai is solving?
Sure. So I guess I'll tell you a little bit of a backstory of how hospital disinfection works today, because that's really what we're trying to improve immensely. And I'm going to start with the way UV light is used today. So for those who may not be aware of UV light, it's a more modern way of doing disinfection. We actually use a very specific type of light that's known to have a very, very strong potency against pathogens. So the devices that exist on the market today, they look like towers kind of wrapped in fluorescent lights, and you place it in different positions around patient rooms and operating rooms and different spaces in hospitals. And you put it in one position, and then you put it in another position, and then you put it in another position, because UV light's all about line of sight. The light actually has to reach the surfaces and move through the air for the disinfection to happen the way it actually does. And that's it. And it has an incredibly high potency. It works really, really well. But the problem is it's slow.
Define slow.
Slow being, for example, a patient room to do something like that takes about 45 minutes. An operating room to do that procedure, because they're a little bit bigger, close to 1,000 square feet, can take an hour and a half, sometimes even a bit longer. Oh. And when you're trying to disinfect in between a discharge or a transfer or between an operation, you just don't have 45 minutes. You don't have an hour and a half to do that. And that's really what we're trying to solve here today.
Okay, thank you for that. So when was the company founded?
So interesting enough, we were founded in 2020. We've got a bit of an interesting backstory. My background and my co-founder's background is actually in aviation.
And sorry, your co-founder's name is?
Arash Mahin.
Okay, thank you.
And at the beginning of the pandemic, we're sitting there both in our executive roles at our respected companies. And we're sitting there watching so many industries got hit so hard during the pandemic. But if you look at it, travel and tourism, along with aviation and hotels and that whole industry just got wiped out. And we're thinking, how on earth can we help this situation? There's an napkin drawings and a few ideas later, we came up with an idea to use UV disinfection and run it down the aisle of an aircraft and disinfect planes from the inside out. And our theory at that time was this crazy pathogen that everyone's talking about didn't just swim across the ocean, it was coming across in the airplanes. And how can we minimize that? That's where it all started.
So you got your pilot's license kind of thing, and you're sitting with your partner, and you're thinking, okay, people don't want to get on planes. How do we solve this problem? Is that kind of how it went?
Well, it's a combination. I think one of our original slogans was bringing confidence back to travelers. And so that was part of it. And ultimately trying to reduce the chances of spreading this pathogen and other pathogens in the future so we can open up the world again. This was a global problem at that time.
So you weren't obviously focused on hospitals or the medical care industry, but you were trying to get tickets sold and back into the cockpit, so to speak.
That's exactly it.
So that's where the idea came from. How long did it take for the idea to go from, as you mentioned, a napkin to a business plan? Like, was the project incubated over weeks, months, years?
The end of the summer. So we started kind of early pandemic. By the end of the summer of 2020.
Okay.
Yes. So around that time, step one was, can we do this? So we kind of put our heads together and started trying to figure out this technology. Could we even do this? Could we figure out robotics? Could we figure out UV light? How is this all going to work together? Took it kind of one step at a time. And we ultimately built a prototype that summer. And interesting enough, one of the city councilors at that time somehow got word of what we were up to and says, hey, can I check this out? Sure, come on by. And this was all happening in my garage at that time.
This is in Ottawa.
This is in Ottawa.
Okay.
And he came by and his jaw hit the ground. I can't believe you guys have just done this. And that was kind of the end of that. And then all of a sudden he's telling someone else. And then all of a sudden we got a little bit of media traction. And yeah, the rest was history from there. So it was kind of an exciting start.
Okay. I want to back up, Cher. I couldn't go to my garage and invent a UV filter. What's your background?
So my background's in electrical engineering. Now, it really isn't in UV. It really isn't in robotics, although I think it is now after doing this for the last 5 years, but we wanted to figure out UV light first. And one really neat thing happened during the pandemic. It wasn't just us that wanted to help. There were so many great stories out there of folks that wanted to help. The UV industry was amazing during this period, specifically the International UV Association. We started calling folks from there saying, hey, we've got this idea. How does UV work? How can we figure this out? And we ended up connecting, believe it or not, with one of the leading scientists who had worked on this for decades and decades and decades. And he says, look, if I can give anything back to the pandemic, I'm volunteering my time. So he really helped us kind of get off the ground and understand the way light works, the way light travels, the way light disinfects, and really start design our earlier models. And that's really how it all came together from a UV perspective.
I'm still at a loss as to how you jumped from thinking about the issue to the solution as UV. Did somebody read a story or see something online? Or what's the genesis of the actual idea? Like, who said, hey, UV, we should go down that path?
I'll 100% have to give credit to my co-founder, Arash, on that one. He came to me, he says, have you ever heard of UV light? And I said, I hadn't at that time. And he said, check it out. I've heard it's amazing at disinfecting. There's no chemicals. And I said, what do you mean we're disinfecting without chemicals? This doesn't make any sense. And all of a sudden I start reading about it and, oh yeah, you know what? Maybe I have heard about this. You hear UV filters in water and that kind of thing. And really, apart from it being used a little bit in hospitals back then, again, as I mentioned before, in a stationary setup with a pole and some lamps, and that was about it. But it was being used a lot in water at that time. And there's a lot of science behind it. And we decided to take it to the next level and kind of make it a little more practical.
So we're kind of towards the end of 2020, you've got this idea. How long did it take to put together a prototype, and who did you turn to assist with that?
Yeah, so another really fortunate thing happened after that. We brought on, he's now our director of operations, but we brought on a gentleman very early on who was very well connected in airline operations.
So what's his name?
JP Floyd. He's now retired, but he was actually an ex-pilot of the 787 Dreamliner. An amazing, amazing guy who knows operations inside and out of airlines and so forth. But he was very well connected with de Havilland Aircraft and made a few connections through there. And we started working very closely with de Havilland, who, if you ever flown with Porter and Jazz, I mean, they fly all the Dash 8 aircrafts. They were very interested in solving this problem because their sales were plummeting as well as, again, the whole industry was going down. They're saying, how can we convince our customers to buy our product because we've got a solution that ultimately disinfects from the inside out? So very early on, we partnered with de Havilland Aircraft, and they helped us basically certify Ray for an airplane. I mean, you can imagine what it has to go through to get anything on a plane from a safety perspective, but that's what we went through at that time. And the tests we went through are just through the roof. And they also helped us from a human factors perspective, saying that's going to work, that's not going to work, here's the size, this is what has to be. And I mean, if you can imagine, our original prototype was 250 pounds. We brought it down to 90 pounds just by changing the metals, changing the materials, changing the size, getting everything sorted out so it could actually fit on these aircraft.
So, and what kind of dimensions are we talking about?
Yeah, so it's not huge. I mean, Ray's about 3 feet long, 1 foot wide. I mean, if you can imagine, it had to go down the aisle of an aircraft, and it's about 5 feet in height.
Okay, and you're referring to the piece of equipment as Ray.
Yes.
Who came up with the name? Kind of an obvious name, I'm thinking, but who came up with it?
Yeah, I mean, the roots of the name, I mean, especially during the pandemic too, were certainly all around a ray of light, a ray of sunshine, a ray of hope. That was really, and obviously the rays of light that are coming off of Ray itself. That's where I guess the idea came from. I don't know if I can pinpoint exactly where it come from. My co-founder, he always says, it was your wife who came up with it. It was your wife. And she says, I don't know if I came up with it. But anyway, there was a list of probably 50 names we had on there, and it ended up being Ray in the end.
There you go. So you initially started off targeting the aviation industry.
That's right.
And then you pivoted at some point to the medical community. Walk me through that. How did that pivot take place?
Yeah, so that was, believe it or not, if not as hard, possibly harder than the original build of the product. I mean, first off, we don't have a healthcare background. We now needed to start really learning our healthcare lingo and figuring out that space and figuring out how hospital operations work and so forth. What ultimately drove it, I mean, we always knew, or we were concerned, I would say, in the back of our head that our airline's going to buy our product forever. I mean, if the pandemic comes, or if and when the pandemic comes to an end, is there a need for Ray on airplanes? Now, personally, I still believe there is. I don't even want to get into the filth that is actually on an airplane and what we're sitting in every seat. But the only advice I can say is just keep your hands to yourself as much as you can. To all that to say, in 2022, 2023, we started to recognize that things were slowing down in aviation, and we were going to have to pivot somewhere. We dabbled with a few other industries, but then we ultimately asked ourselves the question, who really cares about disinfection? Imagine the pandemic never happened. Who cares about this? And for us, all roads kept leading back to healthcare, and really, who's the most vulnerable? And I tell you, if someone is at the hospital and they're sick with something, let's say you walk in the hospital with the flu, your immune system's brought down. You don't want to catch anything else. Having a double hit of something is really, really dangerous. And we really started realizing, wow, we can really make a difference in hospitals. And one of the scientists we were working with, Dr. Barr, down at the University of Western Ontario, he quickly piped in and says, guys, like, I've done a lot of your microbial testing. This stuff is potent. This stuff will work in hospitals. Thumbs up.
Did he kind of plant that seed?
He was not the only one, but one of many that certainly planted that seed about healthcare. And the neat thing was, when we finally did get into healthcare, some of the early conversations we had with leaders in that space, oh my goodness, it was so nice to finally talk to someone who understood UV and understood the power of the light, as opposed to the airline industry. It was very educational. It was very much a new thing. You're very much really having to explain how UV light works. Well, everyone gets it in healthcare, which was great. But now it was just solving, okay, how do we take this tech that is incredibly slow and make it really, really fast so it actually makes sense?
So it dawns on me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the aviation industry was kind of looking at this as a sales piece, where the healthcare industry was looking at it as an actual medtech device.
That's exactly it. And interesting enough, we really changed our mission as a company around that point too. I mean, originally it was about bringing passenger confidence back, where now our mission is to save lives.
Right. So how many units did you sell in the aviation industry?
Oh my goodness. I'd have to look up the exact number, but into the hundreds.
Okay. And I'm assuming through the States, or was it just Canada?
Interesting enough, during that time, we actually were selling more outside of Canada. Now, that was a whole nother story, but we were going through the process with Health Canada. They were adamant, we're not selling in Canada, and which was really, really tough at that time.
Hi, it's Jim. When we come back, Kris and I discuss how they grew from a small team into a company that is building robotics and deploying AI technology in real-world environments. Stay with us. I'm Jim Wilson, and you're listening to NGBiLab, Canada's life sciences startup podcast. Hey, it's Jim Wilson. I mentioned earlier that one of the goals of this podcast is to promote Next Great Big Ideas, Canada's Life Sciences Summit. NGBI is an annual national networking event for Canada's life sciences community, and you can find details on this year's summit at nextgreatbigideas.com. If you'd like to become a sponsor of the summit or this podcast, please send us an email. My contact information is at the end of today's show, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much. Let's get back to our conversation. Welcome back to NGBiLab. I'm Jim Wilson, and my guest today is Kris Rupay of HygenX Ai in Ottawa, Ontario. What was the objection that was raised?
So a couple things happened all around that time. I mean, they were making a lot of exceptions because of the pandemic, which was good. But the challenge was there was a lot of knockoff UV products that were popping up on the market and popping up on Amazon. And it was kind of giving UV light a bit of a bad name through that. Everybody was just saying, hey, look at my fluorescent light. It works. Just turn it on. It's a blue light. Turn it on. It disinfects. Turn it on. And half them worked. Half them didn't work. So they said, guys, enough's enough. We've got to kind of put our regulations back in place to make sure this happens legitimately and get certified. And now the really interesting thing of all that, we ended up becoming, after that whole process, the first company in the world to be certified by Health Canada to provide UV light as a robot or as a device.
How long did that take? Did you get that approval towards the end of the pandemic when it was like, okay, we should have had this 3 years ago?
That's basically what we were saying, 100%. So during that period, we were selling a lot more into the US at that time. We had sales going on in the Middle East and in the UAE, some in Western Europe. We were actually had a couple units over in Africa, but not a lot in Canada.
And how much were the units?
Pricing at that point, I mean, it varied a little bit, but at that time, excuse me, if you can imagine, they were a lot less sophisticated than they are now. I mean, to be able to run these robots around healthcare. This is why I just want to be careful comparing the prices because they are quite different now than they were then. But they were in that kind of sub $50K range back at that time, and they're quite a bit more than that now. But that's what it was to help aviation.
So it sounds like the company was profitable from the get. Were you bootstrapping from day one?
Yeah, I mean, it's a startup, right? And it's a scary moment when you walk away from a great job and good salary, and all of a sudden there's zero coming in. It's a very, very scary moment, right? And it takes time before you ultimately get to a point where you can start paying yourself.
So, and I'd like to talk about that moment. You obviously remember it. Like, what was it where you said, yeah, we should do this? Like, was there a eureka moment, or was it a gradual process to, this makes absolute sense. Let's go.
Yeah. When we were dabbling with this in my garage at the beginning, I certainly believed in what we're doing, but is it going to work? Is it not going to work? Are we just a bunch of guys tinkering? And the reason we were tinkering was because the pandemic was on. We wanted to help. And, I'm big into sports. I play a lot of different sports. I play baseball quite a bit and hockey and golf and all in the summer. And during the pandemic, everything stopped. So we literally had nothing to do. We go into our garage and we start building. Well, again, kind of the story I was telling you before, where we got a couple of politicians excited about this. We caught a couple radio interviews. And then I remember kind of a funny story. All of a sudden in September of 2020, it all led to one more interview with the Ottawa Sun. And they said, we want to call in. We want to interview you guys and we want to take some pictures. And all of a sudden, Sunday morning, we're on the front page. We didn't know we were going to be on the front page, which kind of caught me off guard. We knew we were going to be in the newspaper, so I went to the grocery store, picked it up. I'm like, oh my God, we're on the front page. call up Arash and I'm like, did you see the paper? And he's like, no, what? I'm like, we're on the front page. At that point, I knew I had to make a pretty big decision in my life at that point. First off, I had to tell my bosses at that time, which were
kind of a dead giveaway. Yeah, about that story.
Yeah, exactly. So that definitely pushed me over the top to make a decision.
Right.
Are we going to do this? Are we not going to do this? And I think at that point it was, if I could look forward in time to say retirement, and if I can look back in history, am I going to regret not doing this? And the answer was always yes. And I'm like, I've got to do it. We've got to do it. And fortunately, I mean, both my bosses at that time, I was working for a smaller company that was quickly growing, and it was a great company to work for. They were both entrepreneurs themselves and were incredibly supportive. And they said, Kris, had you left for some big company, we would have been so disappointed in you. But I absolutely love what you're doing, and we're here behind you all the way. And, one of my ex-bosses is actually still one of our advisors, and the other one we keep in close touch and is always giving us tips as well.
That's fabulous to get that kind of support. Were there any other people who you turned to mentorship or advice on how to build a company? Like, this was the first startup you ever did, correct?
It was, yeah.
Did you learn on the fly? Like there's no book on how to go build a successful business.
I mean, a little bit more about my background. I mean, I mentioned I took electrical engineering in school. Business has always been a passion of mine as well. I mean, even going all the way back to university, every single elective I took, it was always something business related. So I always did kind of meddle in that and was interested in that side of things. But again, from the very beginning, we surrounded ourselves with, I think, some great mentors, some great leaders. Arash had a wonderful connection, friend of his down in Silicon Valley. He really kind of straightened us out on how to raise money and all the different options and what the heck's a safe agreement and all those little things along the way that ultimately help us get to where we are today.
So you put the design together, like you did the prototype, I guess what I'm hearing is in your garage. And
that's right.
Where are they manufactured now?
Well, so funny story about that. Regional manufacturer, at my previous job, we used to work with this company here locally in Ottawa that would build just kind of one-off parts for us, just kind of small stuff. So I knew them a little bit, and we reached out to them, among a few others, just to get some quotes. And that company I'd worked with before came back with the best quotes to get some custom metal parts made at that time. And we went ahead and we built with them. And the first prototype, I mean, it was a prototype. It came together. It looked okay. But we got a call a month later and, another pandemic story. Guys, I hate to tell you this, but we're going out of business within a month. And my goodness, what are we going to do here? So fast forward, we were scrambling again, kind of calling all these local companies in the area. And we reached out to, I would call it our second pick, probably our first pick from a professionalism that we first talked to locally here. It turns out, I guess they thought, they'd given us an estimate because we said, how long is it going to take to build the parts? And we wanted this stuff the next day, right? And they're like, well, we can't do it the next day. It's going to be a month or two out. And, well, we don't have a month or two. We need it in days or a week or whatever. And anyway, we finally went back and met with them face to face. We saw their plant. It was an amazing facility that I didn't even know existed here in Ottawa that, looked like one of these, or still looks like one of these massive manufacturing plants with robot arms and brake presses and all kinds of cool stuff in it. And he says, okay, I understand what you guys are doing. We'll pump your parts out quickly now. And they were amazing. And they still manufacture Ray to this date.
So you had a prototype and then a device that you walked down aisles in planes that was a few feet high. What did it shrink, or is it about the same size?
From the prototype, it's about half the size that it actually was. So if you can imagine, coming from the airline space, they have requirements that no personnel on the airfield is allowed to lift anything over 50 pounds. So this is why we had to do everything we could to get this device under 100 pounds, because one person grabs one handle, one person grabs the other handle. And if you can imagine, you could easily walk it up 2 or 3 air stairs, the stairs that actually fold down from the aircraft. I mean, the easiest way is just to walk across a jet bridge, put it on and press start. But that was the requirement in case they had to go up air stairs.
So you did this pivot towards the medical industry. And where are you at the moment?
Yeah, so I'll call 2023 kind of the big engineering year for us. This is when we had to make a robot that literally went down the aisle into something that could move anywhere and see anything. And that's a big difference, because before we're just spotting seats and galleys, and now we're spotting anything. So first thing we had to do, we had to update the robot. So that needed a whole bunch more compute power on board, a whole pile of new sensors. We not only had to see in 2 dimensions, we had to see in 3 dimensions now. We had to see up, down, left, right, all over. So we added all these sensors on Ray. Ray got basically, although the base shape looks quite similar, the overall makeup of it is very, very different from that early design. So 2023 was the year we converted. I mean, the word robot sounds kind of scary. We wanted this thing to be so easy to use. So we wanted, again, our own internal requirement. We said it's like a one-touch start. It's kind of like Amazon. You could click, order, click, order. We just wanted click, start, had to be that easy. So the easier you make something, the harder it gets on the engineering side, sadly. So that's what we end up doing. So we built a robot where you place it in a patient room, an operating room, or any healthcare space, or essentially any room. It knows absolutely nothing about that space. It learns the room, it maps the room, and it actually keeps track of the exact level of light that it gives off on all the surfaces and all through the air, and gives that back to the user as a visual heat map in real time. So you can actually see it doing this, and also presents you with a map at the very end of this. So you can actually see exactly what was disinfected in a room. So not only I talked about time and how much faster we're doing this, but you actually have digital evidence of exactly what's been disinfected. And if you compare that to the way UV is used today, primarily, you don't know if you actually hit all the spots. You're just kind of guessing, right? I'll put it on this side, I'll put it on this side, I'll put it on this side. In comparison with chemical wipes or sprays, did I actually hit all the surfaces?
So
Maybe.
It does a 3D map of the room that it's disinfecting, and it can show you exactly what's been done.
Exactly. And you can see it in real time. So you can actually watch that map being built, and you can actually watch Ray disinfect. So it turns our maps start off as just a basic white map, and they start turning green representing that you've reached the level of disinfection. You start seeing this map turn green and grow, and you can see Ray moving around the map. It's actually really fun to watch.
We have to do a follow-up interview, and you're going to walk me through a live demonstration. So do you have any investors?
We do. We've had a number of investors come on throughout, some earlier on, some more recently. But we always say to keep something like this going, and there's a lot of adoption that has to take place. Change is a very, very scary thing for a lot of folks in both aviation and healthcare. People get UV light works, but using it in a different way and seeing it a different way, adoption takes time. And to bridge those gaps, that's where you do need investors.
Hi, it's Jim again. When we come back, Kris and I discuss his entrepreneurial journey and the challenges that come with trying to scale a startup. Don't go away. I'm Jim Wilson, and you're listening to NGBiLab. Hey, it's Jim Wilson. I'd like to take a moment to explain another goal of this podcast is to shine a light on startups in Canadian life sciences. We hope you enjoy learning about these companies and the people behind them, and if you do, we have a favor to ask. Please spread the word about what we're up to and promote us on social with the hashtags NGBiLab, NGBI Podcasts, and NGBI Summit. Before we get back to the show, I would also like to mention that if you are a startup founder who is working on one of the next great big ideas in Canadian life sciences, or you know someone who is, please tell us. My contact information is at the end of today's show, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much. Let's get back to our conversation. Welcome back. It's Jim Wilson, and my guest today is Kris Rupay of HygenX Ai in Ottawa, Ontario. What has been your biggest win so far?
Our biggest win, I'm going to tell you a story. We have a hospital down in Virginia, and this is how we believe that the company is going to continue growing very, very well. But this hospital in Virginia, we went down there late 2023 and demonstrated Ray. We gave her our little dog and pony show and demonstrated Ray. And demonstrations are awesome. People don't expect it, because what happens is they hear someone showing up with a robot. And what does that mean? Is it something walking around? Often in our space, people even call these stationary devices that are really only on casters, they don't even call those, or sorry, they call those robots because they have one little sensor that recognizes that someone walked in a room. Therefore, I'm a robot. I don't call that a robot, but in theory, they are correct. It is a robot, but we are a fully autonomous robot. We sometimes say we're Roomba like. We actually move around. So when we get to these demonstrations and we say, okay, we're going to put it in the room, we often take a step back and say, you guys are going to give us the demo because we're going to show you how easy this is to use. And they'll push Ray in the room and they'll press start. And a minute later, lights come on, Ray's moving around the room, and I tell you, jaws hit the ground. Seeing is believing. People see this. They love it. They want it. So our goal from a business perspective, I mean, obviously we've got to reach out to as many hospitals as we can, but just getting those demos are so key. People see it. They love it.
Huh. Is there a demo on your website?
There is. I can share some links with you. Okay. We often record many of these demos we give too. So I'll definitely share you some of those links, as it's really, really neat to see Ray in action. I'm kind of getting distracted here, but just going back to that story in Virginia, they loved it so much. They started with one. A month later, they're asking for a second one. So we got 2 Rays down there. A few months later, they're saying, guys, we're fighting for these things. We need a third. So they buy a third Ray. And then they say, hey, guys, our sister hospital wants them as well. And so we got them into their sister hospitals. And we're now in a position where we're about to deploy these Rays across their entire network. So just a really, really neat organic growth that started with one demonstration.
So can you share what the approximate price is for these units now?
I mean, it depends on quantity. That's why I'm always a little bit hesitant to say price. Again, I can get into more details of why, but most of our sales are more in the US than they are in Canada, unfortunately. We are incredibly Canadian proud, but that just is the way this game works right now. But they run kind of in that, 55 to 70K US.
So what has been the toughest lesson on your journey to date?
Toughest lesson? Well, I tell you, that pivot into healthcare was big. It sounds like everything just kind of happened and flowed and this is easy. This is natural. We're just going to go into healthcare. It was such a massive change on a robotics perspective. I mean, I kind of started out early in my career. My degree was in electrical engineering. I did a lot of software. I eventually got into some leadership roles in my second job. I eventually got into some executive roles. I hadn't done code in a lot of code anyways, and probably close to 10 years coming into this. And when you're going through something like this, you really have to wear every single hat possible. Right. And you're jumping in and out of C-level meetings, all suited up and with ties and the whole works. And then the next minute, you're working with the boys on the floor trying to build this thing and turning wrenches and all that. So you're jumping back and forth. And then, the next afternoon, your head's down, focused on programming and coming up with the next greatest algorithm. And it was just so much energy to get all that to work and bring all that together. I'm incredibly proud of the product we have today. But now, when you're building a business, okay, fantastic. You got this product, everything works. And the challenge now is getting our message out there and getting people educated and telling someone that the way you're doing this in the past took 45 minutes and you're doing it in 4 minutes, they almost don't believe you. And then you start getting into the science and explaining why, and okay, I get it now. That's amazing. So, growing the business and the sales is now, I think, a really, really fun journey we're on right now. But yeah, it's not easy stuff.
Well, entrepreneurship isn't easier. Everybody do it. So where are you going to be in 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to say on that one. But like I said, our mission as a company is to save lives. I want to know in a few years that we are saving lives. And I guess I didn't get into all the details of how this is happening, but what we're trying to reduce is what they consider hospital-acquired infections, or sometimes called healthcare-acquired infections. This is when you go into the hospital and you catch something else when you're there. In the US alone, every year, there's 110,000 deaths. 1 in 30 people catch something in the hospital. 110,000 people die every single year because they've caught something they shouldn't have. These are unneeded deaths that shouldn't happen. In comparison, we all talk about gun violence out there. HAIs are double gun violence in the US. There's 50,000 deaths due to gun violence in the US every year, but there's 110,000 deaths due to HAIs. Our goal is to save lives, reduce those HAIs, reduce outbreaks. It's a huge problem. I mean, secondary to all that, we're trying to reduce chemicals. The chemical giants run this show right now. We need to bring this down. I mean, everybody's talking about environmental this, environmental that. We need to stop using chemicals. There's no need for this in healthcare. There's so many better ways to do it. And healthcare is one of the biggest polluters in the world when it comes to harmful chemicals. And it's not just about putting chemicals in the air and in the water. It comes down to the poor staff that are breathing this stuff in and day out. It's not good for them. And I mean, another way, I guess we're hopefully saving lives by reducing chemicals and introducing a much cleaner, safer way to ultimately disinfect these spaces. And so that's really where we want to be. I mean, obviously we want to penetrate the US market, and we'd love to see more and more come back to Canada as well. And we've got next generation robots coming down the line as well, which I think is going to be super exciting. And there's even more past those robots. I can't get into all those details yet here today, but maybe in a couple of years I can share that story with you. But we've got big plans.
So maybe something to go into a classroom setting that would accomplish the same goal kind of thing.
It's possible. Now, with that said, though, I still come back to who really needs a safe, disinfected space, because you can overdo it too. I mean, getting exposed to pathogens is not necessarily a bad thing if you have the immunity to do it. But it's the immunocompromised folks out there. Those are the folks that you really have to care for and really make sure they don't get sick. And in fact, pretty wild story, but our leading scientists who did a lot of our studies to show how well Ray worked, specifically even on COVID. I remember the day we saw COVID under the microscope, just again, jaw hit the ground. You could hear a pin drop. It was amazing to see all that. But one of the biggest things, I said, why are young, healthy people dying here? What's going on? I mean, one young, healthy person catches it and they're calling it the cold. The other person catches it and they're dying. Like, this is crazy. And he says, Kris, the thing I wish they would talk more about is the folks that are dying, not in all cases. I mean, there's exceptions everywhere, but the folks that are dying are most likely immunocompromised folks that their immunity was not there to fight it off, unfortunately, at that time. And they may not even have realized it. They might have had an underlying flu or an underlying condition or whatever it was. They catch COVID and all of a sudden their immunity just gets taken over. COVID takes over and all of a sudden they're in the ICU. And that's why I truly believe where we can make the biggest difference is in acute care hospitals, long-term care facilities. This is where the folks that are immunocompromised really, really, really need this technology. I do believe there's many other spaces for it too, but that's number one for us.
Yeah. What an exciting journey you must be on. Is there any advice you've been given that you could pass along to our younger listeners who may be thinking about following your path into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I've got a few things I'll definitely mention on that. But number one, never stop learning. You know, I always kind of took the attitude when I was young and naive. You're going through grade school, you're going through high school, you're going through university, and boom, I got my first job. I'm in. Now I'm just going to work and make money and have fun and life is going to be great. I quickly found out when you kind of get in that groove, your job is not that exciting anymore. You know, things aren't as interesting. And I realized it's not interesting because I'd kind of peaked at what I was doing at that time. And I realized you never, ever, ever, ever want to stop learning. And when there's always a challenge ahead of you, it keeps things interesting. It keeps things fun and, never end that journey. So if I can pass that on, ask as many questions as you can. The other thing, I mean, on that note, I think I mentioned it a little bit before, but again, if you can ask yourself right as you're retiring, have I done everything I wanted to do in my career? Hopefully the answer is as close to yes as possible. There's always going to be something, I wish I kind of did this, and it's always in hindsight, but I just don't want to have any regrets. And I know if I didn't do this, I would definitely have had a regret along the way. So if that's something that is on your mind, just do it. Just jump in, take the chance. It's a wicked challenge. It's a ton of fun. It's a different type of stress. The next thing, entrepreneurship isn't necessarily for everybody. I think you have to ask yourself, there's a lot of different things that might be right. I mean, in my career alone, I've kind of worked for three different styles of companies. I've worked for a very large, most government-like company that I found very repetitive. I worked with some wonderful people. I learned a lot at the very beginning of my career, but then again, I think I started to stale out a little bit and I wasn't learning as much and I didn't enjoy it as much, again, because I wasn't learning. And I found that it's a different kind of stress. And then the second part of my career, I would say I was working for kind of a medium, smaller company, and all of a sudden you have to wear all hats, and it's a different level of stress that you're dealing with at that time. And then finally in entrepreneurship is a whole nother level of stress that you're dealing with is literally you're wearing every single hat and having to be a part of every single decision, and also doing your engineering job during the day and building this stuff and doing everything. I think you just have to ask yourself which one's right for you. And if you ask my wife, who's been incredibly supportive through this entire journey, she would tell you I was more stressed in the original situation where I wasn't really motivated by my job anymore, and less stressed in this situation and so forth. So I think you just have to ask yourself what level of job is right for you and what kind of stress you're willing to ultimately take on. The final thing, I think you have to be incredibly adaptable. I mean, I'm just dabbling on some of the stories I've told you today, but be very reactive and very adaptable to anything. Things can change overnight and just have to adapt. And I mean, as I mentioned, our biggest adaptation was the shift from aviation to healthcare, but you have to be ready, and anything can change on a dime. You're doing it day by day.
Wow, Kris, this has been so much fun. Thank you for this.
Jim, it's been a real pleasure.
Likewise. And I'm serious. I'd love to do follow up. And if I'm in Ottawa, I'm going to maybe call you up and say, come and see these things in person. And I'll look forward to it. But all the best in the next couple of years. And I'll look forward to seeing some press about some major wins.
Jim, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Yes, let me know when you're in Ottawa. We love showing off Ray, and hopefully your jaw will hit the ground too when you see it.
Done. That was Kris Rupay of HygenX Ai in Ottawa, Ontario. If you'd like to learn more about what Kris and his team are doing, you can find details at HygenX.ai. That's HYGENX.ai. To learn more about this show and the other NGBI podcasts, please visit nextgreatbigideas.com. You can also follow us on social at NGBI Podcasts. For details on who I am, please go to jim-wilson.ca. You can also find details about my day job and my team at laboccupier.com. If you'd like to follow me on social, I am at laboccupier. This episode of NGBI Lab was researched by Xenia Pinto and edited by No Limit Marketing. If you'd like to send us an email, my address is jwilson@Leonard, that's LENNARD.com. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Jim Wilson, and you've been listening to NGBI Lab. See you next time.